The train screeched to a halt against the howling December wind, the snow swirling like white ghosts across the lonely station of Pine Hollow. Clara Davenport stepped onto the platform with trembling hands, her breath fogging the air as she tightened her woolen shawl. She had come from Boston, fleeing heartbreak, poverty, and the suffocating pity of friends who whispered about the poor, abandoned girl she had become. So when she answered a mail-order bride advertisement placed by a rancher in the western frontier, she told herself it wasn't desperation, it was destiny. But the man waiting for her was not the one who wrote those letters. Standing apart from the gathering crowd, tall and silent, was a striking Apache man with a somber face that revealed more sorrow than welcome. His dark braid lay over his shoulder, dusted with snowflakes, and his onyx eyes held a storm that matched the winter night. Clara swallowed hard as she approached him. "Are you Seth?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He nodded curtly. "I am Seth Blackhorse. My brother Samuel wrote to you." His tone was firm, almost cold, as if each word came through a barrier made of grief. Clara blinked. Brother? She had exchanged months of tender letters with Samuel, letters that spoke of loneliness, future dreams, and wanting a woman who wouldn't fear the mix of Apache heritage with frontier life. But Seth's gaze was guarded, unreadable, heavy with shadows. Before she could ask more, he continued, "Samuel passed 3 weeks ago. A fever took him before anyone could save him. The world spun for Clara. Samuel, the man whose words had warmed her lonely nights, was gone. And she, a stranger in this harsh land, now stood before a man who clearly had not wanted her here. The townspeople expect me to bring you to the Blackhorse Ranch," Seth said stiffly. "It would shame the family to leave you with nowhere to go. You may stay until after Christmas." His voice made it obvious. She was a burden, not a blessing. But Clara followed him into the snowy night, her heart both aching and confused. The journey to the ranch was silent except for the crunch of hooves beneath the snow and the cold wind slicing between them. Seth's posture was rigid, but every now and then Clara caught him glancing at her with something more complicated than dislike, something closer to fear. He seemed like a man fighting ghosts. The ranch house appeared warm and welcoming, under strings of pine garlands and yellow lamplight. Inside, Samuel's mother, Ada Blackhorse, embraced Clara with teary eyes as if she had known and loved her for years. "You must be freezing, child," Ada murmured, wrapping Clara in warmth that soothed her aching chest. Across the room, Seth watched the scene with conflicted eyes, as if the sight of kindness hurt him. The days that followed were filled with tension, silence, and moments Clara couldn't quite understand. Seth was always near but distant. He carried firewood to her door, repaired the loose shutter in the snowstorm, brought her warm tea when she coughed from the cold, yet he barely spoke, barely looked at her longer than a heartbeat. Clara learned the truth from Ada. Seth had lost his wife 2 years ago, murdered in a raid by horse thieves. He had blamed himself ever since, drowning in guilt and burying his heart to keep from ever loving again. And Samuel, his gentle younger brother, had been the one who pushed Seth to hope again through the idea of bringing a bride to the ranch. Clara was meant to marry Samuel, yes, but Samuel had wanted her to heal Seth's broken heart, even if he never got to live to see it. One evening, as snow drifted thick around the ranch, Clara stepped outside and found Seth staring into the mountains, fists clenched, breath heavy with unspoken torment. "Seth," she said softly, "you don't have to push me away. I don't fear you." He turned sharply, eyes blazing with pain. "You don't understand," he muttered. "Everyone I love gets taken from me. My wife, my brother. I will not lose another soul." Clara's heart cracked. She placed a trembling hand on his arm. "Maybe," she whispered, "this time life is giving you someone instead of taking someone away." Seth flinched, not in anger, but in vulnerability. For the first time, she saw the man behind the grief. And in that frozen moment, under falling snow and trembling hearts, something fragile and hopeful flickered between them. Something Samuel would have wanted. Something Seth feared but needed. Something that felt very much like the beginning of a Christmas miracle. The morning of Christmas Eve broke with a soft golden light spilling across Pine Hollow, touching the snow with a gentle glow. Clara woke early, her breath forming small clouds in the chilled air as she prepared breakfast in the ranch kitchen. She had barely slept. Her conversation with Seth the night before replayed endlessly in her mind. His pain, his vulnerability, The way his eyes softened for a single heartbeat when she reached out to him. Something had changed. She felt it trembling in the air around them. As she stirred the pot of steaming porridge, she sensed him before she saw him. Seth stepped quietly into the kitchen, the scent of fresh cold following him. He hesitated as if unsure whether he belonged in this moment. "Morning," he said, his voice rough, low, uncertain. Clara offered a gentle smile. "Good morning." Their eyes met and held for longer than either expected. He moved closer, rubbing his gloved hands together, as though scared to break the fragile warmth forming between them. "The snow is deep today," he murmured. "I'll take you into town if you wish to see the Christmas celebrations." Clara's breath caught. This was the first time Seth had invited her anywhere. "I'd like that," she said softly. Town was alive with lanterns, pine garlands, laughter, music, and the smell of cinnamon drifting from every corner. Children threw snowballs, couples held hands. Shop windows glowed with festive warmth. Seth walked beside Clara, not behind her, not ahead of her, but beside her, as if the invisible wall between them had begun to crumble. At the general store, an older man nodded respectfully to Seth. "Good to see you out again, Blackhorse." "Been too long." Seth stiffened. Clara saw him tense, saw the old fear rise, but then his gaze shifted to her, and slowly he exhaled. "It has," he said simply, and Clara saw pride in the old man's eyes. Snow began to fall once more as the church bells rang, calling the town to its small Christmas ceremony by the giant outdoor tree. Clara watched families gather, fathers lifting children, mothers laughing, couples sharing scarves, and for the first time in many years, she let herself feel hope instead of fear. Seth stood with his arms crossed, his eyes scanning the tree lights, but Clara sensed he wasn't really seeing any of it. He was thinking, remembering, struggling, when the choir began to sing Silent Night. Seth suddenly stepped away from the crowd. Clara followed quietly and found him leaning against a snow-covered fence, his breathing unsteady. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. Seth swallowed hard. "I used to bring my wife to this every year. She loved the lights, the songs, everything I didn't understand." Clara touched his arm. "Seth, loving someone doesn't dishonor her memory." He looked at her with raw, exposed grief. "How can I feel anything again without betraying her?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Because love doesn't replace people," she whispered. "It grows beside the love you already carry. There is room in your heart for more than pain." Seth stared at her, really stared, as if seeing her for the first time. Snow collected in his hair, his lashes, his coat, and something in his gaze melted like ice in sunlight. He stepped closer. "Clara, when Samuel wrote to you, he hoped you'd save this ranch. Save my mother. Save me." His voice cracked. "But I didn't want saving." Clara's hand trembled as she lifted it to his cheek. "Then let me simply be here, not to fix you, but to walk with you." Seth closed his eyes at her touch, a long breath escaping his chest as though releasing years of buried grief. When he opened them again, he whispered, "You've changed something in me, and that terrifies me more than anything." Clara smiled through tears. "Then we're both scared, but maybe we can be scared together. And then, a miracle as gentle as snowfall." Seth took her hand, not accidentally, not out of obligation, but willingly, gratefully, as though holding light after years of darkness. They returned to the ranch just before dusk, the sky glowing pink over the mountains. Ada watched them enter hand in hand and pressed a trembling hand to her heart. "Samuel would be smiling today," she whispered. Clara felt her throat tighten. In the quiet warmth of the ranch, Seth lit a small lantern and placed it on the windowsill. "In Apache tradition," he said softly, "lighting a flame at Christmas means welcoming hope into your home." He glanced toward her. "Would you welcome hope if it meant welcoming me?" Clara stepped into his arms, her voice barely a breath. "Yes." Seth lowered his forehead to hers, the lantern light painting their faces in gold. In that moment, with snow falling softly outside, a grieving heart finally healed, and a lonely bride finally found the love she never expected. And on that Christmas Eve, beneath the glow of a single lantern, two souls discovered that sometimes the greatest miracle is learning to love again.